Thank you so much for coming and welcome back to another episode of The Black Firm, where we dissect the largest social issues and really how they affect the black community. Before we do get started, I just want to give you a quick reminder. If you could, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and put the notification on. It's free to do, and it really does help. I put a lot of research into these videos, so if you could take a quick second before we start to do that. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. I was watching the news the other day, and it was talking. I was watching what's his name, Robert Kennedy, and I was watching him talk, and I think he's a mess, by the way. First off, but so I'm watching this guy talk, and he was saying how he wanted to ban the use of food stamps to buy like junk food, essentially. So that's like no sugary processed foods, essentially just like only healthy options, vegetables, fruits, essentials, kind of like what WIC does. I personally am a huge critic of this administration and of Robert F. Kennedy, but I really had to think about, okay, well, is this something that's positive? Like, well, because as we know, obesity, diabetes, all these different health-related issues that come a lot from our diet affects Black and indigenous people way more than any other community. So I really had to think about, okay, well, will this be something that helps us out? So his argument is, limiting access to these ultra processed foods will help fight obesity, diabetes, these other food related illnesses down. But I believe that it's a lot more complex than what it's made out to be. And I do really want to, analyze it a little bit further. Studies show up to 60% of the average American diet is made up by ultra-processed food. And that number is even higher in Black and Hispanic communities where we have less access to fresh whole foods. So what we're seeing in real time is these large corporations, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, lobbying against these acts and saying, no, this is targeting these low income consumers who and limiting their freedom of choice. But what I say is that these large corporations don't care about the consumer. This isn't about a freedom of choice. This is about corporate profits. They're saying, well, they're not going to be loading up, and that 70% of their diet isn't going to be made up of this ultra processed food anymore. We have less shares, so no, they're lobbying against it. So I guess that leads me to my next question, which is this really about public health policy, or is this just kind of another corporate band-aid meant to put on something over a underlying issue? Because if the goal is to improve health conditions, then to simply take the junk food off the table isn't enough. The real question is, what's going to replace it? Is healthy or fresh food even available? Is it even affordable for people who live in these underserved communities? And that leads into the next issue, which is food deserts and why healthier foods cost more in the first place. So think of a food desert as an area or community who doesn't have access to markets or grocery stores that sell fresh produce. Instead, what we're seeing in these larger urban areas is a more concentration of fast food restaurants and gas stations, which are all, peddling these high sodium, high sugar, ultra processed snacks. Now, this isn't just a mistake. Food deserts are actually engineered. Large grocery chains avoid going into lower income Black neighborhoods because they don't see them as profitable. What instead we see is them clustering in these larger white affluent neighborhoods, these people who have more disposable income, who can afford things like organic produce. This is a direct result of redlining, corporate divestment, and decades of system neglect. I think we kind of all notice that if you go to the grocery store, you'll notice that a pack of strawberries or some blueberries will cost more than a cheeseburger and some fries. And that is a main reason for that is because the United States subsidizes corn, wheat, soy, all those things that are used to make these ultra processed food, while fresh produce typically doesn't get a lot of these subsidies. People say, oh, well, this community is suffering from diabetes or high obesity, and they're saying, well, just purchase healthier food. In reality, that's not an option for parents who are working paycheck to paycheck, if and just trying to make ends meet. You're gonna pick what's the most filling, cheap, and fast. And so these United States supermarkets, or excuse me, these United States food companies have made sure that the most cheap, fast, and filling things are ultra processed, sugary, and are going to cause, a health problem. To me, this isn't about blaming individuals. This is really about taking a look at these corporations who are selling us this junk and raking in, massive profits, right? Hospitals, insurance companies, these people are raking in record profits. Why? Because it is to keep us sick and unhealthy is profitable. If we're healthy and we're cooking for ourselves and we're living long lives, and healthy, there's no profits to be made. And that's why we have to identify the weaknesses in capitalism of a system of have and have nots, and how the have nots have been down for so long. At what point in America did the have nots step up and say, well, nah, this is too much? Why don't we have, community gardens in the hood on a large scale? I know I've seen some, I'm from Jacksonville. I've seen some, but I feel like there should be, we have all these, different like little green belts and stuff. Why don't we why isn't there a collective or a co-op where we put in and create community gardens? And now I'm not saying people aren't doing it, because I was looking around, I saw, let me see, in Detroit, they got a Black Community Food Security Network. It's one in Chicago, Soulflower Farm, in New York. And I really think that, we have to support Black collectives. We have to support Black farmers. The Department of Agriculture says that the Heirs Property Act was the leading loss of involuntary loss of farmland for Black farmers between 1910 and 1997. That land was, really distributed a lot during the Homestead Act, and it was distributed to white farmers, Black farmers, right? Black farmers was distributed land during the Homestead Act, but through different policies and legislation, that land was seized. Um, and and that's not something that's talked about enough, is that Black people are completely underserved and underrepresented, especially in farming. And so we do need to uplift Black farmers. We do need to, and kind of, this is some of a theory that I feel like, is that Black people, in order to achieve restitution or reparations, should, practice socialism amongst themselves and capitalism with everybody else. Our economy in America, especially as Black people, is strong. We do have buying power, we have purchasing power. So there needs to be a threshold of us saying, okay, well, we're gonna take our business and move it this way and move it that way. We got to see like how much money both parties, the Republican and Democrat party, spend on accosting the Black vote. You know what I mean? Like, so that means to me that there is value in it. There is value in our voices and what we in our decisions, and especially how we spend our money. So, just kind of really thinking about, the whole gamut of everything. RFK's proposal to ban the use of food stamps for sugary and ultra processed foods, while in theory it sounds good, it's very performative, and it really is placing the blame on the individual as opposed to addressing the corruption in the actual system. Anyhow, I do want to kind of go ahead and wrap up the conversation. I do appreciate everybody, sticking around. Please leave a comment, and if you have anything to add to the conversation about food deserts. Thank you so much, and I'll definitely see you next time.